Lebanon in 1982 when it invaded to eliminate the threat of Yasser Arafat's forces. He's correct. There is a similarity and the threat is the same. He's correct, but not in the sense he had in mind. In 1982, as in 2008, the threat was the threat of political settlement, and it was crucially necessary to eliminate that threat. That's, again, standard practice. I mean, it's not that Israel does not want peace. Of course it wants peace. Everyone wants peace. Hitler wanted peace, for example. The question is, on what terms? From its origins, long before the establishment of the state, the Zionist movement has understood that to achieve its goals, it would have to delay political settlement, meanwhile slowly building facts on the ground as the basis for some eventual settlement. Even the occasional agreements, as in 1947, were recognized by the leadership to be temporary steps towards further expansion. The 1982 war is a dramatic illustration of the need for undercutting the threat of political settlement. It was called pretty openly in Israel a war for the West Bank. If we can get rid of the diplomatic efforts of the Palestinians, which were becoming very annoying, we can continue to take over the West Bank at the cost of the destruction of Lebanon and the killing of thousands of people. The 1982 Lebanon war was followed by Israeli support for Hamas so as to undermine the secular PLO and its dangerous peace initiatives. Another case that should be familiar, if it isn't, is Israeli provocations before the 1967 war, which were designed to elicit a Syrian response that could be used as a pretext for Israeli violence and for the takeover of more land. That's at least 80% of the incidents, according to Defense Minister Moshe Dayan. Now, this effort, persistent effort to delay political accommodation has always made perfect sense. It's not irrational. And the same is true of the hysterical lies about how there is no partner. There simply is no other way to take over land where you're not wanted. So it's sensible. And for the same reasons, similar reasons, Israel has consistently preferred expansion to security. That's been particularly evident since 1971, when Israel made a really fateful decision, I think, backed by Henry Kissinger, namely the decision to reject the offer of a full peace treaty by President Sadat of Egypt, which incidentally offered nothing to the Palestinians. It's an agreement that Israel and the United States were compelled to accept at Camp David 8 years later. It's after a major war, which was a near disaster for Israel and immense suffering. Now, that goes down in history as a wonderful achievement of U.S. Involvement in bringing peace. In fact, it was a diplomatic catastrophe for the reasons I mentioned, but that's beyond the capacity of educated people to discuss or think about. Again, I urge you to look at the facts if you're interested. Now, a peace treaty with Egypt in 1971, which the U.S. and Israel rejected, that would have ended any significant security threat. There was none from the Palestinians, and Egypt is the major Arab military force by far. But there was an unacceptable quid pro quo. Sadat insisted that Israel abandon its extensive settlement programs in Egypt, namely in the northeastern Sinai. And as usual, security was a lower priority than expansion, as it still is. Today, Israel could have security, normalization of relations, integration into the region, but it very clearly prefers illegal expansion, conflict, repeated exercise of violence, to teach lessons to the two-legged beasts, actions that are severely eroding its security, even if it gains short-term military victory. One of the wisest voices in Israel, unfortunately a tiny minority, Uri Avneri, recently wrote that after an Israeli military victory in Gaza, what will be seared into the consciousness of the world will be the image of Israel as a blood-stained monster, ready at any moment to commit war crimes and not prepared to abide by any moral restraints. This will have severe consequences for our long-term future, our standing in the world, our chance of achieving peace and quiet. In the end, this war is a crime against ourselves too, a crime against the state of Israel. It's good reason to believe that he's right. If I can quote myself again, several decades ago, 30 years ago, I wrote that those who call themselves supporters of Israel are in reality supporters of its moral degeneration and its probable ultimate destruction. And regrettably, that judgment looks more and more plausible. Meanwhile, we're observing a very rare moment in history. It's what the late Israeli sociologist Baruch Kimmerling called politicide. It's the murder of a nation at our hands. Thanks. Are there mics after?
If you have questions for Professor Chomsky, you should go to the mics, as I said earlier, and just line up, and we'll recognize you as time permits.
I see one. Is there another one? Is there another one?
The other one is over there. See?
Oh, no. Oh, yeah.
One you could never see.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, good morning, well, good evening, Professor Chomsky. Yeah, my question is about the consensus, the American consensus about the support or Israel's role as part of America's geopolitical future. Recently, there was a letter in the Financial Times about how our support for Israel is such a huge geostrategic gift to China and other competitors.
It's a huge one?
Geostrategic gift to China.
To China?
And the other competitors.
Yeah.
Are we seeing a crack in the consensus about the role of Israel?
It's a serious question. One can debate whether it's been wise for the United States to take the position of extreme support for Israeli violence and terror, expansion, criminal acts, to reject political settlement. That's a question that can be asked. What we do know is that American elites think it's right. I mentioned the military, which is very happy with it, partly because Israel is just a major and obedient military base. In fact, back in 1958, U.S. intelligence concluded that support for Israel is what they called, I think, a logical, it's a logical corollary of our opposition to what they call radical Arab nationalism. Radical just means independent, not following orders. So yes, it's a logical corollary to support for, to opposition to independent Arab nationalism. And if you look at, in 1967, when the relations really became firm, there was a reaction, immediate reaction to a major service that the United States, that Israel performed for the United States and for its major allies, Saudi Arabia, namely destroying the basis for secular Arab nationalism in the region, Abdel Nasser's Egypt. And so it continues. And up till today, the military is quite happy to have an obedient, powerful military force. According, it's Israel's air and armored forces, small country, but its air and armored forces are larger and technologically more advanced than any NATO power outside the United States. Of course, it's because it's an offshoot of the United States. Israeli and U.S. military industry are very highly integrated, so much so that one of Israel's major arms producers actually shifted its executive offices to the United States. American high-tech industry is very enthusiastic about Israel. You can tell that just by looking at investment flows. They've been shooting up, including the major corporations, Hewlett-Packard, Microsoft, Intel, Warren Buffett, and so on. So they apparently think it's fine. American educated elites think it's fine. Ever since 1967, they were very